I have had like zero time to prepare. So once again, this is just going to be a creation between you, me, and the universe, and we'll see what we come up with. Um, but a couple of thoughts occurred to me today. One of which I'll share now, just as a sort of a context provider for what we're doing, is that not to consider this a debate. I'm not saying like we're not going to discuss stuff and people aren't going to have conflicting ideas or not completely agree with each other. Hey, Maria. Um, but it's just that this isn't a debate, as in we're not going to go, well, I think that. That's not what this is going to be. This is a conversation that we've started actually 13 weeks ago. So, and also, even though you guys, a lot of you have never met, proselytizing, no proselytizing. I don't know what that means, but if that means what I just said, then yes, I'm going to look that up afterwards. You might have just brought a new word into my vocab. Thanks, Steve. But yeah, we really started this conversation about when we started this. Hey, Ian Ray 68. We started this conversation 13 weeks. This is our 13th one of these, and not everyone's been here for every. No, trying to make converts. Brilliant. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, not every one of these, everyone has been on them, but like there's always been somebody I know from a previous one on these conversations, and I feel like as we've sort of started to acquire some mass, as it were, we're kind of on this ship together, all kind of doing our Navy SEAL thing, of like how of helping to navigate it. So we don't have to, we don't need to do any of that sort of stuff. And the other thing as well is that we, in that same spirit, I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I think we should try and listen and communicate like from the heart, not as in to gush. I'm not talking about that sort of Valentine's-y type of, hallmark type of heart, but I'm just talking about more like the intuitive side of ourselves. G Unique and Ellen, welcome. Good evening. I was just sort of setting a little bit of a context for this conversation, just saying that, this is not a debate as such. We're not like, hey, I think this, and well, I think this. Oh, you shut your face, Trump supporter. That's not what we're doing here. Because also I was saying, we started this conversation when really these live talks began, and we've sort of created a little bit of a momentum. And also just to try and listen and navigate the conversation from our hearts, because I think that's what will make for the most interesting kind of discussion. So, by the way, Steve, do you mind if I share the message that you sent me? And also, I've got something else, another thing that I'm going to share to sort of start the ball rolling. And just to... G Unique, looking forward to an argument. Thank you, Steve. Brilliant. Simon Fielder joined and waved. Simon, this is a chat about spirituality, which I know you love. So yeah, the first thing I was going to share was that my mum, because okay, like with spirituality, it's such a broad topic. It's like, where do you start? So I'm just going to pull on the first thread that came up. Yes, Simon. So the first thing that came up this week, Ryan, all right, Dagenham and Proud, yeah, nailed it. Talking about prayer. That's the thread I'm going to pull at. Not because I'm necessarily I don't pray, really, unless something terrible is happening. But my mum said, my brother has been quite ill recently. He had a stroke last year. And there was a point where he was in hospital, and he really wanted to leave the hospital. He was admitted for some further tests. He'd been in for a while, had come home, and then had to come back. So he thought that he was going to get discharged. I think it was like a Friday night or something. And hey, Natural Bun, it's a queer, right? Have I got that right? Oh, he's okay. He's doing well. He's downstairs, actually, just chilling with my mum, having a bit of a Mother's Day thing downstairs. But anyway, so he's in on a Friday night, and he thinks he's about to go home. And the doctor came in, and they said, no, we're really sorry. We have to keep you in for some more tests. We'll probably be able to discharge you on Monday. And he was just really upset because he just really wanted to be at home, creature comforts, be back with his wife, you know, all the things. Most people hate hospitals, right? Especially if they're there as a patient. So like to then be told you got to spend 2 more days here or whatever was not a cool thing to hear. And my mum went home and she said, I prayed. But this is the interesting thing about my mum. She goes, I didn't just pray for him. I prayed for the doctors. I prayed for the nurses. I prayed for everybody. And no word of a lie, the next morning, the doctors came in Saturday morning and told my brother that he could go home. So that's kind of where I wanted to start the conversation, or that, not where I wanted to start the conversation, but that's the thing that caught my attention this week, was my mum telling me the story, because I told her that, you know, I was having this conversation, and you know that came out of the conversation. A couple of people just joined that I want to say hello to. Sarah Pretty UK, what's up? And Andrew, Wax Pusher. Andrew, what up, Mamo? Mammy O. Okay. Yes. So that's the one thing. The other thing is as well, just in terms of like, it's sort of related to the same thing, but not to do with something as serious. So Steve, who's on here as my old RE teacher, he messaged me and he said something along the lines of, I will come back to your comments and stuff, by the way. He messaged me and he goes, you know, I was starting to feel like I enjoy these chats, but I'm feeling like they're not really talking about what I really want to talk about, which is how creativity and spirituality kind of relate to each other. Correct me if I get any of this like wrong, Steve. And I was thinking, oh, do I still want to keep joining them because I'm feeling a little bit frustrated? And then he says he was driving home thinking this, and then he got home, happened to look on Instagram and saw that you know, the little post that I did earlier in the week going, this week's chat is spirituality, and he's just like, what? Like literally just moments before he'd been thinking that that's what he wanted the next talk to be about. And interestingly, it was kind of off the back of a previous conversation that Steve and I had that made me think, oh, we've kind of been dancing around this topic anyways in relation to what we talk about here. Might as well go all in, right? So that was, you can describe that in so many different ways. You could call it coincidence, you could call it you know, logic, you could call it prayer, answering a prayer, you could call it the machinations of the universe or whatever. The truth is none of us really know what's going on, and I find it a little bit frustrating sometimes when people talk like they have absolute truths, because, you know, the fact is, the only fact I really believe in is that none of us know anything really for sure. You don't even know if the sun is definitely going to rise tomorrow. Who knows what sort of weird celestial event could happen that could just literally extinguish the sun. It's unlikely, but none of us know for sure. But we got to talk as though we do. Or a lot of people talk as though they know everything. Okay, so Dagenham Proud, Ryan says, I feel prayer helps. It gives you a channel to share your concerns. It helped greatly in my life and my job. Aquia says, wow, by the way, I'll tell you my name afterwards. Keep talking. Okay. Oh, I'm not saying it right then. I'm going to call you Natural Barnett just in case I'm not saying it right. Because, anyways. Ellen agrees. And Ryan says, you just have to have faith in what you believe in. And Steve says, you don't have to unpick the experience. Just enjoy it and appreciate it. G Unique says, well, actually, and I'm not sure what that's in relation to. Andrew says, no, this is Andrew. This is Joachim says, there is no truth, just beliefs and hopes. Yeah, I mean, oh, listen, guys, help me out. Like, because seriously, I'm not quite sure where to start. The other thing that I was gonna share as well was that I got this really strong sense of like, in terms of what we're all up to in terms of being creatives, is that I feel like gratitude is something that is given a lot of lip service, but I don't think we take it seriously, like how important it is. Bron Hamilton, welcome to the convo. G Unique says it's about the sun rising, not rising tomorrow. Okay, cool. And Steve says, I preached today. It was about telling your story. Okay. Yeah, I feel like gratitude. Sorry, I'm a bit. This is a challenging one to do, to be honest. And I think as well, partly it's because my attention is a little bit split with what's going on downstairs. My family are downstairs, Mother's Day type of thing. Not that I want to be here with you guys, but it's kind of like I left the conversation a little bit too late, because normally I have a little bit of a sit down and get myself into the zone. And today it was just like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be upstairs sort of thing. And I sort of ran off. So I'm just sort of getting here, basically. So anyone who feels like they want to pick up the conversation on my behalf while I sort of gather my thoughts or whatever, then please feel free to do so. Ian says, spirituality, is this where creativity begins, perhaps? That's an interesting thought. Why don't we have a pause, Steve says. I'm happy to pause. I'm really happy to pause. I feel quite calm, about not knowing what's going on. But yeah, I still because at some point I sort of find my thread, and then we're away with the races. But yeah, today it's a little bit more challenging. Here's my candle, anyways, but it's kind of a bit blown out because of the exposure on the old camera. Anyway, bear with me, callers. Okay, let me start with gratitude, because what came up. I'll come back to creativity, Ian, as well, and G Unique. I'll come back to that. You're saying G Unique in terms of spirituality, is that where life begins? Don't know. Oh, you've just reminded me of something. Good. Okay, now we're off. Okay, so gratitude. The reason that came up for me this week is I was thinking, I saw a fellow artist, let's say. I don't want to give too much information away about who they are, but they posted a video online talking about their experiences, and I kind of was distracted by how much complaint there was in what they were talking about, and I realized like how ungrateful it was sounding. I'm not saying that this person is generally an ungrateful person, but I think in that moment what they were sharing was coming from a real place of complaint. And it's not that there's a right or a wrong, or it's not like, I don't want to negate the things that were going wrong or that they were not happy about in their life. There's always going to be things that we're not completely feeling, do you know what I mean? But I think from an artist's perspective, gratitude for what's so, and for what we have, and the fact that we can pursue this, I think is like a fundamental building block, and something to remind ourselves of when things aren't quite going the way that we want them to. This leads me on to another thought, which is that there is a lot of social agreement. I'm going to come back to your comments, but because I've just found a thread, I'm like, okay, let me just pursue this. Oh, it's gone. Sorry. Oh, it was about gratitude. Oh man, okay, I'll come back to it. Let me see what your comments were. Ellen says, well, in many religions there is a creator God. Well, I mean, that came up before, Ellen, as well. Is like I was talking about the fact that because we're creators, in a way, we are like channeling presence in godlike energy, because in Bible sort of story, I wouldn't nearly call it mythology, but I know Christians don't think of it as a myth, but in Bible stories, God is a creator, and he created a world, he created everything. And that's basically what all of us are doing when we're creating our work, because behind the story that we're telling, behind the script that we write, behind the painting, the photograph, the poem, the whatever it is, there's a whole world suggested. Because you think of like the Scream painting, that suggests a whole world that could be turned into an animated film. And if more images consistent with that style were created, there would suddenly be this entire world of people who are in this state of anxiety and tension or whatever, as shown by the image or the person in that original painting. So we are creators in the sense that we're creating worlds, and we're gods in the sense that we're creating worlds. in the book Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh talks about, in the third book, he talks about how, because Conversation with God is about him channeling this conversation that started off with big complaint. That's it. I've just remembered, and how am I gonna remember? There we go. Let me just write this down so that I don't forget, because threads are running away from me. So yeah, he talks about how in the third book. All right, so yeah, I was explaining what it is. So Conversation with God is a series of books that this guy had, starting with talking about, why is my life so shit, God? He was just like in a really real funk. So he was like, oh God, my life is awful. And he was like, wrote it down, and then he started to dictate what was coming back down to him. And so he ended up writing these 3 books. And in the third book, he talks about, God tells him basically, or he says, God told him that we're kings, that we are actually creators, creating creators. But we, in the Christian faith certainly, and probably it does it in some other monotheistic faiths, is that the right word, that we infantilize ourselves a little bit and make God the person that we need to look up to, and we deny our sort of ability as creators. But actually, that's exactly what we are. And before I go to your comments, I'm just gonna plant the seed of what I remembered as well, so that that I can get that out of my head and into the conversation. It was about context. There's a lot of agreement, I was going to say, in society to look at the world in a very ordinary way. Like, I remember going out with a boyfriend who, his attitude was, you earn money, you look after yourself, you see your friends and family, you love your mum, and that's it. That was his whole sort of belief system. It was nothing more phenomenal than that. And I didn't know at the time, but that was not enough for me. I didn't realise that me being with somebody like that was never going to work, because we just don't see the world in the same way. Even though I wasn't actively doing a lot to explore, different, ideologies or disciplines or anything like that, I knew that you work, you get paid, you die, you turn to worms, wasn't earth and worms. That wasn't ever gonna be enough for me. But I think there is a lot of agreement to not think about the world in a phenomenal way, that like as in the world is a phenomenon that is happening, not as in it is amazing. That's not the sense of the word that I mean. And so as artists, we have to train ourselves, I say, to like start to see the world in a phenomenal way, start to think about it in a bigger context than just, because in a way people don't even really think about the world as this ball of rock and iron or whatever floating through the cosmos. We think of the world as in our city or our home or our town or our friends. We're not day to day present to the fact that we're hurtling through space at, what is it, however many hundreds of miles an hour, spinning at however many hundreds of miles an hour around this, in this galaxy, in an arm of a spiral galaxy of many thousands of galaxies in a, I mean, it just blows your mind. And when you think of your life in that bigger context and all the things that would have happened to have you here, I mean, you could only be left with gratitude and a sense of awe and wonder and a sense of, what am I waiting for? And a sense of joy and a sense of inspiredness. But because day to day so many people are living in a, well, I've got to put food on the table, and it's not that those thoughts aren't legitimate and real, but that can't, if you make that the extent of how you see your life and your world, you're limiting yourself, because there's such a huge, like profoundly massive context in which your life could be lived, that living from a we're all gonna die, earth and worms, is just like, it's not that one's right or wrong, but it's just like there's such a bigger, more powerful, more intriguing way to see your life. That's the job of an artist. That's what I'm saying. Andrew says spirituality without religion is about oneness with humankind, the planet we live on, and all of its organism. You put a question mark on the end, but I think that sounds like a statement, and I would take that as a statement. Spirituality without religion is about oneness with humankind, the planet we live on, and all of its organisms. Yeah, I think fundamentally spirituality is probably just about how we connect or how we relate to what is. I'm not going to say what's out there, because some would argue that what's out there is actually coming from in here. So I'm just going to say what is. And what happens with religion, I believe, and feel free to say otherwise, I think that religion is a way of looking at what is and finding interpretation for it and meaning through a particular paradigm. And I think that science is, again, another relationship with what is through the paradigm of empirical evidence, research, an experiment, So it's not like we're not all dealing with the same matter. It's just that what the religious types will call a particular phenomenon is different from what a scientific type will call it, as opposed to what somebody who believes in a sort of more mythical or magical thinking would call something. So, for example, the Northern Lights, I heard an example yesterday where the native, I guess Canadians it would be, who are observing the Northern Lights, believe that it's a particular god, a god of one of many manifesting, whereas, when apparently the French arrived in Canada, they were like, and they're running to church, and, then scientists come along later and they go, well, no, what it actually is something to do with magnetic fields and blah, 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 blah. And it's not like, it isn't that, it might actually still be that god of the whale and the caribou or whatever it's supposed to be that the native Canadians thought it was, believe it was. It might be all of those things all at once. All we know of what is that there's these lights in the sky. That's the only thing we can say for true. And actually, we can't even say that that's true, because the lights aren't necessarily in the sky. The light is in our eyes. The message, the interpretation of it is in our brain. Weird, right? Citizen Zoe says, I never pray, but I understand the concept. But I guess prayer could look different at all. I'm going to say something about prayer, seeing as you've just mentioned it very quickly. I don't pray myself, but I believe that prayer, and I think this may have come up in the previous week, I think prayer is just an energy, an energetic, it's an energy with a frequency that people are putting out into the world. Same as, remember I was saying the thing that the Margaret Thatcher thing that, before that I said that, your thoughts have an energetic frequency, your words have an energetic frequency, your actions have an energetic frequency, your habits do, and your character does. And so Margaret Thatcher's thing was, be careful of your thoughts, because your thoughts become your words become your deeds become your character, or something like that. And so basically, if these things are transmissions, because a word is a transmission, if somebody calls somebody a bad name, like if you were passing somebody in the street and you went bastard like that, it affects them because it's an energetic transmission. It's a communication, but it's also, you're communicating energy. If you went, you lovely bastard, say for example, just using the similar words, you would be making it would have a different energy and it would be a different communication, but it's a communication nonetheless, and it's an energetic transmission. A prayer is an energetic transmission. Now, if enough people are praying at the same time, things can happen. And if enough belief and intent is behind that prayer, because I don't think it's just about the word, it's about the intent behind it, the energy, the that's coming up from inside the body, the earth energy and all the rest of it, you're using to power the word or the thought or the deed. That's what really makes it stick or not stick. So if you mean it, and you really comes up from inside of you, because it's like when someone says they're going to do something and they're like, oh, you know what, I'm really gonna try and lose weight this time. No, I really am, because I mean it's been 10 years now. Who believes someone that talks like that? But if someone says and it comes up from inside of them, that's it. I am losing weight this time. I am sick of being 2 stone overweight all the time. You believe somebody when they're saying that, and the only difference is that it's coming up from inside of them. So prayers are the same thing. They're a transmission with an intent. But bet you any money, not all prayers are as powerful as, not all prayers are born equal. Someone with a very strong faith and connectedness, I think their prayers will be more powerful. My mum, I'm not saying she's like the most powerful like prayer. It's not a competition, but like, she prays with such intent and she's so dedicated to her faith that I would imagine that someone like her issuing this transmission to the universe, she's just like, I mean it. I want my son out of hospital. But she's not going to make it a demand. She's obviously going to make it a polite request to God. But, she's going to have like a strong intent behind her prayer. Okay, so Maria says, talking about talking about social agreement related to gratitude. Yeah, I'll come back to that because I was a bit foggy. Oh, confabulation galore. Hello. And Blue Knight 88. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for keeping me on track here as well, for being there for me. Got it. Gotcha. Biblical view. We are co-creators of this world with God. We're either creating a hell or a heaven on earth. That's really interesting. I don't know how you feel about it. Like, because my sort of like non-secular, wait, is that the right word? Yeah, non-secular interpretation of heaven and hell is kind of, having done a lot of work like looking at the ego or story sort of consciousness that we can live out of, I feel like when you're deeply embedded in a story-based, ego-based pain body, as Eckhart Tolle would call it, consciousness, that is hell. So hell is actually all, hell and heaven are on earth, because when you're living out of ego, then it feels like hell, even though you don't know necessarily that you're in it. And maybe that is what the hell is like, is you don't know you're in it. But heaven is when you're so present that you're experiencing eternity, because when you're in the present moment, when you're in the present moment, you just have access to something quite brilliant. You're not suddenly hooked on past failures, future concerns. You're just completely here, and that's quite heavenly, actually, in a sort of more purest sense of the word, non-religious sense of the word. It's quite heavenly to be present. So maybe from a non-secular point of view, maybe heaven and hell is something that we can create for ourselves, I wonder. Andrew says, according to Gnostic, is that right? Gnostic? I'm trying to silently pronounce the G. Gospels, we all have the divine light within us. Yeah, I would totally believe that. I think that maybe it's not in us, maybe it's through us. Steve says, when you say phenomenal, I always think of the Muppet song, Phenomenal. G Unique's telling me how fast the Earth is moving, 96,000 miles an hour, but could be wrong. You're the only person that said something, so we'll go with it. And Joaquim says, totally agree in that it is more to it than just food on the table. Food for the soul is equally important. Absolutely. And I think you just got to find someone that resonates with you on that level, in terms of where, what you are interested into, what I mean, on that level. Because if I was food on the table, love your mum, then we die and turn to earth and worms type of girl as well, then we would be perfectly suited. But it just happened to be that that's not who I was, and therefore I was kind of with the wrong person. Peely, welcome. Hello, nice to see you. Andrew says, well, where religion is set in stone, spirituality seems to be more about individual paths and journeys. Yeah, there's much less of a clear path for a spiritual seeker, or whatever they might want to call themselves, ourselves. I don't even like the word seeker because it's another label, and I'm just really curious about the world and how it works, and I suppose maybe I'm kind of a little bit, not addicted, but I really love the moment of inspiration and insight when you just have an aha moment. Where you're just thinking about something and suddenly the pieces start to fall into place. And one of them for me that feels consistently true is that notion of there is what is, and then there's everybody's interpretation on top of it, and some interpretations are more organized and documented than others, but there's no denying that there is and is. It's just, what is it? And that's but a lot of the times where people's, where there's difficulty in terms of how people communicate with each other, because I say it's this and he says it's that, and we just fight. G Unique says the whole of the New Testament is more or less an interpretation and personification of the sun and the night sky. Interesting. I would love to hear more about that. I don't know if you're going to be able to. It's probably quite a lot to write in a comment. Our names have energy. Yes, our names do have energy. The other day I looked up my name, the name that my parents had given me, my middle name, Morenike, and it was really interesting how, it talked about that Morenikes want to be creative, but they like to be secluded. Okay. Anyways, it was just a very accurate description. It was kind of amusing to me that it was just like, it's like they gave me the name after finding out who I was, rather than the other way around. Like I'm me getting the name and becoming the person that the name describes, sort of thing. Anyway, Andrew says, Northern Lights are measurable by scientific instrumentation, negating the possibility of false interpretation by our eyes. Science is quantifiable, religion and spirit are faith-based. Okay, so with Northern Lights, I'm not denying that there is some way that they will show up on it in scientific instrumentation that will be consistent. What I'm saying is, what lands in our brains, you don't know that when you and I stand next to each other looking at the Northern Lights, we are actually seeing the same thing. That's all I'm saying. Then in terms of science being quantifiable, it is quantifiable, but it isn't necessarily consistent. But what they can sometimes do is just average shit out to make it look consistent, so that their interpretation works. I'm not, again, like I said before, happy to discuss but not going to debate. Religion and spirituality are faith-based. Yeah, they are largely. They're certainly not empirical. It's not like you could go prove there's a God to a Christian person and go, okay, well, here's my proof. That would be satisfactory anyways to somebody outside of the faith. Obviously they would have the Bible and all their kind of things that they would use to prove it, because it's those are valid artifacts of proof as far as they're concerned. But yes, essentially, objectively, I guess they're faith-based. But what are we going to do about that? Joachim says, Neil Gaiman wrote about that in American Gods. Prayer is energy. Maybe we should be careful to what we pray to. Who we pray to? Yeah, probably. Unique says, someone said something along the lines of, prayer is when we speak to God. Meditation is when he speaks to us. Oh, yes, I heard that. I like that a lot. Lucky number 32 and J Wad 7 joined. Steve says, the problem is not documented religious exteriors, e.g. Bible, but literalism. Taking it all literally. Instead, I regard it as a record of stories where people have journeyed with God. I like that. That sounds good. Unique says, the 12 disciples of the different zodiac constellations. Blimey, the God Son is Jesus, 3 wise men Sirius. Okay, woo, interesting ideas. Ellen says, plus, even in the scientific measured worldview, mine, there are far too many inexplicables for me. Yeah, I mean, look, science isn't finite the way that people think it is, and I'm not here to say to dismantle anybody's scientific beliefs or anything like that, or to discredit it in any way. But I don't think science is what people think it is. I think people think that science is finite, and it isn't. You know, there are things that we have believed in the name of science that we now think are ridiculous. And it's because people were willing to, you know, start to just like scratch at the beliefs and just look a little bit further beyond it and just go, oh, is this thing really round? Or does this thing really travel at this speed? Or does this thing consistently do this thing? What does this thing do when it's not observed? Is there a way of observing it without observing it? You know what I mean? And we find that, you know, this whole thing about particles behaving differently depending on whether they're observed or whether they're not observed. They behave as a wave when they're not observed and behave as a solid when they are observed. So if our observation makes a difference to a particle, then there's huge implications for that, of which I think that the mainstream scientific community aren't quite ready to accept, because they're pretty old school and pretty sort of can be quite rigid in the way that we usually ascribe to sort of religious types. So my position is that I don't feel any need to go, you're wrong. And I find it kind of exhausting when people go, oh, religion's stupid, because what you are missing out on is this huge wealth of teaching and understanding that's possible through stripping away the bits that you don't need and listening to what the underlying message is. Like, my mum listens to the Bible Network quite a bit, and I sometimes, you know, I say my mum's quite a lot, and so sometimes I'm sat there and she's like, I'm like wishing she would put curry on or something else, but actually I sort of start listening, and even though there's a part of me that just wants to reject what's being said, oh yeah, what do you know, Christian, blah, sometimes I go into that headspace. When I actually start to listen to the message and just strip away my prejudices every single time, I mean, I don't listen to every program on the Bible Network, so there probably are some that I'm just like, nah, but every time, especially the ones that don't that are able to use maybe the Bible or scripture as a launching point but don't stick with it, every time they have said something that I believe already, or that's already in some other discipline, or that already just makes sense logically, even if you're not religious, even if you're an atheist, you would go, yeah, fair enough, that's true. Like, you know, treat your neighbour as you would want to be treated, just on a fundamental level. Do you know what I mean? Like, but people want to throw out the entire sort of faith with the bathwater because of a few things that other people are doing. So I think, so for me, I'm not down with anybody that tries to use religion to sort of to disrespect or have prejudices against, say, like homosexuals or something like that. But I am down with the idea of treating your neighbour as you would want to be treated, about propagating this idea that we're all one, about maybe, you know, exploring this idea that there is more to us than our material existence. And those are all fundamental parts of, like, religion. I don't have to go, and I can go to church and I can distinguish between the bits that I do believe and the bits that I don't. And I think that is I'm saying it because I'm doing it, but like, it is a much healthier relationship, just maintaining a little bit of like objective skepticism about the thing that you're experiencing. Ian says, there was a professor whose name escapes me. He postulated that between here and Mars there is a tea set floating in space. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, that's essentially science, isn't it? The teapot is waiting to be found. Same as the roundness, the globeness of the Earth was waiting to be found when they all thought it was flat. We're not perceiving everything that's out there. We're only perceiving what we're capable of. That's another conversation I had with my mum, is that, like, it's possible that we're only able to perceive what we can perceive at this current time because we couldn't cope with anymore. Because you think about, there's a part of the brain that sort of sort of focuses the mind and tells you what to focus on at any one time. So, for example, in this room that I'm in, if I start to broaden out my awareness, well, I can see there's a bag down there, there's a chest of drawers thingy there. I'm sort of aware of it now, and it's got some clothes in it, and oh, there's a light up there. Do you know what I mean? There's more things around me, but I can't constantly be I can't constantly have those things in my awareness, because otherwise I would go mad. And so maybe there's so much more out there waiting to be experienced. That's what Carl Sagan said, isn't it? It's like there's ideas out there waiting to be had, or thoughts waiting to be thought, or you know, things, ideas waiting to be experienced, or something along those lines. And we just have to get ourselves into a space where our beings are capable of experiencing these things without going into overwhelm. Maybe this is where the thinking took me, is that maybe this planet is exactly as it's meant to be, given everywhere we've been, everything that's developed, every sort of evolutionary change that humans have made, everything. I mean, we act like our brains and our brain functioning and our thoughts are my thoughts. I think this. Me over here, I think this. Your brain is the product of millions of years of evolution. You're not in control of it. It's not yours. You're like almost like a custodian of it, in a way. And you think, yeah, the thoughts are yours in the sense that they're happening in this space, but they're not yours. They're inherited through thousands of years of evolution. The witch hunts were considered scientific at the time, Ellen says. Exactly. Things change. Ian says, religion and God are to me the same concept, and that's fine. G Unique says, most religions share common themes, and originally we saw the sun as the bringer of life. I think it still is the bringer of life, because if we didn't have it... Andrew says, science is limited by our ability to quantify the world around us. The lack of knowledge makes things a mystery, but not necessarily one which we should jump to fill in by regarding it supernatural. I quite like the idea of there being a bit of a mystery to the world, and that, you know, I think that the being in the question, I like that phrase, being in the question of something. I think being in the question of something is much more interesting sometimes than being in the answer. I think, or having the answer. I think grappling with an idea is really exciting when it doesn't matter. Only when it doesn't matter. If your life depends on it, if like someone's got a gun to your head, then that's kind of stressful. But like being in the question of what the hell is this? What are we doing here? Like there was one time, Steve, I'm coming to your comment. There was one time where, oh yeah, I was thinking, why do things grow and spread and get bigger or have babies and continue to grow and grow and grow? And I was like, this, like, because why doesn't a flower just live and just shoot up and then just die straight away, and then that's it, that's the end of that? Or why do animals continue to have babies? Why do they have this instinctive desire to have babies? Why is there this desire built into mammals and, you know, all animals, I guess, in a way, to like fornicate, create, and then nurture until they're adults, matured, and then they go off and do the same thing? Why are things evolving? Why don't you just get identical panda, like down the generations? Why is it that like little mutations start to, why does the world, why does the universe allow for this to happen? Why is this a function? Because we take it for granted that evolution is just a thing that's supposed to happen and it just happened and we'll just back reference explain it. But actually it could equally be that things just continue exactly the same. It starts off here and 10,000 or 10 billion years later it's exactly in the same spot, but it isn't. And I had this thought the other day. I was like, I think the universe is ambitious. I think that in some way the universe has some crazy intent or something. It's got some idea of itself. That it there is some thrust forward that isn't necessary. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's not necessary, but for some reason it's still happening. Otherwise everything would just be the same. There would be no need for human. You know, we wouldn't have needed to have evolved into existence. But for some reason we did. So I'm wondering, is the universe up to something? Some people say that, you know, human consciousness, the consciousness that we have, is the universe's desire to know itself, to see itself, to be able to look back on itself. Because there's no other conscious sentient being that can do that yet. Or maybe we're not aware of it. Maybe they can and we just like haven't appreciated. Maybe whales and dolphins, you know how smart they are. Maybe they're already doing that from their perspective, giving the universe the opportunity to just peer back at itself. But maybe we're the only ones that can record it and write it down, what we saw. I don't know. Anyways, Steve says, religion, stripping away the bits you don't need, was also my sermon this morning. Oh, Steve, look at us. We're riffing. We are just like, we're apart, but we're totally in sync. And Joachim says, there is no dead people, just a different phase of life. Absolutely. Rasmus joined. Welcome. Wave. Andrew says, sounds like an interesting sermon, Steve. Sorry you're late. Oh, bless you. No worries at all. The first 15 minutes, I'm not going to put up on YouTube, that's for sure. Death being, okay, do you want to talk about death being a different phase of life? Yeah, I'd go with that completely. When people say that somebody died is sad, I think they usually are talking about for themselves, and that's fair. Because I think that when they cross over to this other plane of existence, whatever that may be, it's pretty decent. I have a feeling that it's going to be a pretty decent experience. For the most part, but who knows? Who absolutely knows? But they're transitioning certainly out of their material existence for sure. Rasmus says your being and your physical brain might not be the same. Yeah, I mean, I can't say anything about this because I'm not dead, so I have no idea. Okay, you guys are discussing, well, you guys can all see these comments about people not really dying. And G Unique says necessity breeds invention, even in nature. But why is this necessity even, an inbuilt factor in the way that the universe, in the movement of the universe's evolution? I just think that's really, really interesting. My brother has just joined the conversation. He's downstairs. Hello. The answer is 42, not 47. Okay, lots of stuff about death. Steve says, want to know something else weird? I just took a call from a church member to thank me for my sermon and came back to the live chat just as you read out my comment. Perfect. Boom. So I'm all caught up now. So let me see if I can steer this back to how it relates to us as a as a creative person. I think the thing about you're off to do the lottery. Okay, have fun. I think the thing I said about gratitude is an important factor. Also, the notion of like treating the world like a phenomenon, like it's some. It isn't just about a material experience. There's more to the eye than what you see, what you materially see and experience in the physical world, and that you as a creator are the steward of these ideas. You're the conduit through which they can become material. Hey, more 4690. You're the way that these ideas get to. You see how we're just saying about dead people pass on to a different non-material plane. These ideas. I don't know if it's the same plane. Who knows? But those ideas that could potentially be birthed, they got to come in somehow, and that has got to be through you as a creative. So I guess you've got to stay in a sort of. Gosh, what's the right way of saying it? You've got to say it is. You've got to provide the soil, tilled soil for you to be able to, for these ideas to be able to be ushered in. It's as simple as that. Hey Martha, how's it going? I don't think there's much more to say about it in terms of how it relates to a creative. If anyone's got any thoughts, then feel free to drop them into the comments. But I think that's really it. It's living in gratitude, being a steward for ideas coming into the universe, and seeing your life and your creative experience in a bigger context than just this sort of very perfunctory material existence. Rasmus says, I'm walking through Copenhagen Airport on my way back to London. Someone was sitting at a juice bar watching an old Andi tribute on YouTube, and I suddenly remembered. That's weird. Steve says that's the important point. Tilled soil. Well, yeah, that. Thank you for sort of nudging me towards that, because actually, I think that's one of the things that we as creatives can do for our spiritual health, in terms of being able to really be able to do our work to the level that we want to be able to do it to, is keep tilling that soil, keep providing a landscape for ideas to come in, keep yourself healthy spiritually, so that ideas feel like they want to reside with you and want to come through you. Because it's not that they're not going to come if you're, obviously otherwise ideas wouldn't come to people who take drugs or drink heavily or, abuse themselves or other people or whatever. So it's not that, but like, if it's like I said, what my acting coach said about some people create from joy and some people create from darkness. If you want to create from joy, then create this lovely fertile land from which you plant the seeds of your ideas, and they can grow healthy and strong. And be things that make a difference in the world. There we go. Confabulation Galore says, give those creative ideas the psychic space to develop. Absolutely. G Unique says, by the mere fact that we observe something, we have an effect on it. The whole world is based on our own perception. Again, true that. Andrew says, inspiration for creativity through spirituality. Michelangelo Handel. Yeah, I mean, probably though at that time, a lot of their inspiration came from, well, it would have probably been religion, but still, it's still the same sort of wheelhouse. And Martha says, be things that make a difference in the world. I couldn't agree more. Yes, Rasmus says, some people, not me, draw strength from darkness. Yes, they do. And I'm not saying, there's not a judgment there. Obviously, it'd be great for the world, and you don't want that person to be hurting themselves by drawing from darkness, whatever that may mean. But I'm just talking to you because you're the one here now. It's like, if you want to create and draw from joy, that will more than likely bring you joy, and more than likely bring joy to the people that experience your work. Ellen says, but even if you reside in gratitude and you fail in the eyes of the world, you still come out happier. Exactly, because you've not, because I think if you're living in gratitude, you'll appreciate there's no real such thing as failure then, in which case, yeah, because it's, I think that's what you're alluding to there by saying failed in the eyes of the world. So it's not really a failure, because but I mean, because I was thinking, how many times have I failed in my life? And I can't really think of any many examples. Not because projects haven't fallen apart, I haven't done a great job, because I've lost out on a job. You know, all the things that people normally categorize as failure, but I don't categorize them as failure in my life. I just categorize them as something that happened. Something that happened, maybe that didn't go the way I wanted to, but that's not necessarily failure. Do you know what I mean? Unique, be a reflection of how you want the world to be. A good idea, but it's not really where people come from, unfortunately. I wish that was, I don't wish actually, but one day we will get to a point where we'll really take that on as a necessity. At the moment, it's like kind of like a nice memey idea, rather than one that people feel like, it's like saving the planet. People are like, yeah, we should save the planet. McDonald's, plastics, coffee, you know, whatever. So we're not quite there yet of be the change you want to see in the world, but we're heading in that right direction. Steve said, listen, actually, Steve, you seem to be the punctuation for all my like little interjections. I've got 7 minutes left. It took me so long to find my way in this conversation that I've only got 7 minutes left. But one other thing that just a blog prompt I got from another comment earlier was about being of service. I think one of our things that we can take on, responsibilities, and I had a little think about responsibility. I'm going to talk about this very briefly before I make that point. But that basically, people sometimes look at pop stars and sports people and all that and go, they've got a responsibility to diddly dimly da. And like Rihanna's got a responsibility to teach young girls how to yick yak yak. And David Beckham should be showing young boys how to blah 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 blah. And I thought to myself, is that true? Is that true? Is that true? And I thought to myself, actually, it isn't. Rihanna doesn't have, using as an example, Rihanna doesn't have any responsibility to young anybody's or anybody. Her only commitment was to make music. That's the agreement that she went into, is I'm going to make some music, and if you buy it, then cool. She doesn't owe young girls anything. She doesn't need to be an example. But responsibility is deciding for yourself that that's something you want to do. It's not something that, because otherwise, if people are forcing it on you, that's not responsibility. That's a task or a command. You will show young girls how to not dress like a, you know, I don't know, a stripper or whatever. I don't know what people think of Rihanna. Responsibility is something that you've got to take on for yourself. So be the change. That's a responsibility you've got to take on for yourself. And being of service, I say, is a responsibility that it would be great if artists, in fact all of us really, but artists started to think of their work not in terms of what I can get from it, but how can I be of service? How can what I'm doing make a difference in the world, in my life, in my network of people that I know? What is it in what I'm doing that can make a difference and really, really transform somebody else's experience? I got a message from somebody recently who was saying, oh, you know, my name is such and such, I'm an actor, and I just wanted to let you know that I really enjoyed Blur, and I wanted to see if there was any way that I could get involved in future projects or be of help to you. And I thought, what a brilliant message, because even though I'm not making any films at the moment, and so there's nothing for this guy to get involved in, what a great way, what a great approach. Because conversely, I got a message through Facebook Messenger, which, yay, is now off. And this guy badly spelt, you know, badly languaged message going, I'm a musician, yeah. It wasn't even like Dear Andi or something. I was like, I'm a musician, yeah, and I just wanted to find out if you wanted any music for your next film. And then there was a link, and it was like the link was dead. Anyway, so I couldn't even like, and it was just so badly done, and the energy of it was so like without care, that I was just like, I almost wanted to write back to the person and say, look, if you, and let me just save you some time if you're going to approach anyone actually who really is making films that would, be able to be in a position to hire you. So I think starting to look at your work and who you are as like how can I be of service? How can what I be making a difference out in the world? And obviously sometimes we are going to be having to put our own needs and desires above anything else, because like the saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. You've got to make sure you're filled up first before you start to give to others. And obviously we don't want to get into any kind of martyrdom sort of dynamic, but yeah, it is important to start to consider at least even taking on the responsibility, and that's how I think you start to elevate your own vibration, because ultimately that's the gig, isn't it? No matter what you're doing, no matter what line of work you're in, is like if you can raise your vibrations, your experience of being a human being is massively elevated. Massively elevated. Okay, Steve says, classy group here. We've had a conversation about religious spirituality for an hour with no derogatory comments. Oh man, I mean, this group is everything. This group is a lit. There is hope for the internet and the world. Yeah, absolutely. Rasmus says, evanescence. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how to pronounce that word. I.e. haunting melody is still beautiful but very dark. Oh, I see. You're talking about people who use darkness for inspiration. Fair place. G Unique says, yes, it's good here. And now I've got the countdown. With great power comes great responsibility, says G Unique. Rasmus says, responsibility is something you take, like dignity and respect is not. Rasmus says, something you are given. Oh, yeah, right. Dignity and respect. Respect is something you've given, but you can still have respect for yourself, I guess. Anyways, Martha says, yeah, agree. Not allowing society to make that decision to be responsible for you. Yeah, and Jeannie says, life is so much more peaceful without a Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. I don't mind WhatsApp, but Facebook Messenger had to go. Joaquin says, yes, that is a good concept to be of service. Really like it. Great. Okay, you guys, this is like really had to lean on you this week, and thank you for just like being patient with me in this one, because I felt a little bit ill prepared. What I'm gonna do, because I've got the countdown, is I'm gonna just sign